Clark. I am going to be reading part 2 of the chapter 5 Gorillas by Mary Kingsley. The book is called Travels in West Africa. It was published in 1897. And again, I'm reading part 2 of the chapter 5 Gorillas. We saw this influence of light on a large scale as soon as we reached the open hills and mountains of the Sierra del Cristo and had to pass over these fearful avalanche-like timber falls on their steep sides. The worst of these lay between Afua and Igaja, where we struck a part of the range that was exposed to the southeast. These falls had evidently arisen from the tornadoes, which from time to time have hurled down the gigantic trees whose hold on the superficial soil over the sheets of hard bedrock was insufficient, in spite of all the anchors they had in the shape of roots and buttresses, and all the rigging in the shape of bush ropes. Down they had come, crushing and dragging down with them those near them or bound to them by the great, tough timbers. Getting over these falls was perilous, not to say scratchy work. One or another member of our party always went through, and precious uncomfortable going it was, I found, when I tried it in one above Igaja, 10 or 12 feet of crashing, creaking timber, and then flump onto a lot of rotting, wet debris, with more snakes and centipedes among it than you had any immediate use for, even though you were a collector. And there you had to stay, while Wiki, who was the most critical connoisseur, selected from the surrounding forest a bush rope that he regarded as the correct remedy for the case. And then up you were hauled, through the sticks you had turned the wrong way on your down journey. The Duke had a bad fall, going 20 feet or so before he found the rubbishy heap, while Fika, who went through with a heavy load on his back, took us, on one occasion, half an hour to recover, and then we had just got him up to the top and able to cling onto the upper sticks. Wiki, who had been superintending operations, slipped backwards and went through on his own account. The bush rope we had been hauling on was too worn for the load to use again, and we just hauled Wiki out with the first one we could drag down and cut. And Wiki, when he came up, said we were reckless and knew nothing of bush ropes, which shows how ungrateful an African can be. It makes the perspiration run down my nose whenever I think of it. The sun was out that day. We were neatly situated on the equator, and the air was semi-solid, with the stinking exhalations from the swamps with which the mountain chain is fringed and intersected. And we were hot enough without these things because of the violent exertion of getting these 12 or 13 stone gentlemen up among us again, and the fine, varied exercise of getting over the fall on our own account. When we got into the cool forest beyond, it was delightful, particularly if it happened to be one of those lovely stretches of forest glooming down below, but giving hints that far away above us was a world of bloom and scent and beauty, which we saw as much of as earthworms in a flower bed. Here and there the ground was strewn with great cast blossoms, thick, wax-like, glorious cups of orange and crimson and pure white, each of which was in itself a handful, and which told us that some of the trees around us were showing a glory of color to heaven above. Sprinkled among them were branches of pure Stephanopoulos-like flowers, which said that the gaunt bush ropes were rubber vines that had burst into flower when they had seen the sun. These flowers we came across in nearly every type of forest all the way, for rubber abounds here. I will weary you no longer now with the different kinds of forest, and will only tell you that I have let you off several. The natives have several different names for 7 different kinds, and these might, I think, be easily run up to 9. A certain sort of friendship soon arose between the Fans and me. We each recognized that we belonged to that same section of the human race with whom it is better to drink than to fight. We knew we would each kill the other if sufficient inducement were offered, and so we took a certain amount of care that the inducement should not arise. Gray Shirt and Pagan also, their trade friends, the fans treated with an independent sort of courtesy. But Silence, Singlet, the passenger, and above all, Naguta, they openly did not care a row of pins for, and I have small doubt that had it not been for us other three, they would have killed and eaten those very amicable gentlemen with as much compunction as an English sportsman would kill as many rabbits. They, for their part, hated the fans and never lost an opportunity of telling me, "These fan be bad man too much." I must not forget to mention the other member of our party, a fan gentleman with the manners of a duke and the habits of a dustbin. He came with us, quite uninvited by me, and never asked for any pay. I think he only wanted to see the fun and drop in for a fight if there was going to be one, and to pick up the pieces generally. He was evidently a man of some importance from the way the others treated him, and moreover he had a splendid gun, with gorilla skin sheath for its lock, and ornamented all over its stock with brass nails. His costume consisted of a small piece of a dirty rag round his loins, and whenever we were going through dense undergrowth or wading a swamp, he wore that filament tucked up scandalously short. Whenever we were sitting down in the forest having one of our nondescript meals, he always sat next to me and appropriated the tin. Then he would fill his pipe and, turning to me with an easy grace of aristocracy, would say that what may be translated as, "My dear princess, could you favor me with a lucifer?" I used to say, "My dear duke, charmed, I'm sure," and give him one ready lit. I dared not trust him with the box whole, having a personal conviction that he would have kept it. I asked him what he would do suppose I was not there with a box of lucifers, and he produced a bush cow horn with a neat wood lid tied on with tie, and from out of it he produced a flint and steel and demonstrated. Unfortunately, all of his grace's minor possessions, owing to the scantiness of his attire, were in one and the same pineapple fiber bag, which he wore slung across his shoulder, and these possessions, though not great, were as dangerous to the body as 1,000,000 sterling is said to be of the soul, for they consisted largely of gunpowder and snuff, and their separate receptacles leaked and their contents commingled, so that demonstration on fire-making methods among the fan ended in an awful bang and blow-up of a small way, and the professor and his pupil sneezed like fury for 10 minutes, and a cruel world laughed till it nearly died for 20. Still, that bang, with all of its failings, was a wonder for its containing power. The first day in the forest, we came across a snake, a beauty with a new red-brown and yellow-patterned velvety skin, about 3 feet 6 inches long and as thick as a man's thigh. Naguta met it, hanging from a bough, and shot backwards like a lobster, Naguta having among his many weaknesses a rooted horror of snakes. This snake the Ogawi natives all hold in great aversion. For the bite of other sorts of snakes they profess to have remedies, but for this they have none. If, however, a native is stung by one, he usually conceals the fact that it was of this particular kind and tries to get any chance the native doctor's medicine may give. The Duke stepped forward and with one blow flattened its head against the tree with his gun butt, and then folded the snake up and got as much of it as possible into the bag, while the rest hung dangling out. Naguta, not being able to keep ahead of the Duke, his Grace's pace being stiff, went to the extreme near of the party, so that other people might get killed first if the snake returned to life, as he surmised it would. He fell into other dangers from this caution, but I cannot chronicle Naguta's afflictions in full without running this book into an old-fashioned folio size. We had the snake for supper, that is to say, the fan and I. The others would not touch it. Although a good snake, properly cooked, is one of the best meats one gets out here, far and away better than the African fowl. The fans also did their best to educate me in every way. They told me their names for things, while I told them mine, throwing in besides, as a dash for top, a few colloquial phrases such as, "Dear me now," "Who'd have thought it?" "Stuff, my dear sir," and so on. And then I left them, and when I left them, They had run each together as if it were one word, and a nice savage sound they had with them too, especially "dear me now." So I must warn any philo- philologist who visits the fans, be aware of regarding any word beyond 2 syllables in length as being a native origin. I found several European words among already slightly altered in use among them, such as amuck, which means a mug, alas, a glass or a tumbler. I do not think whether their ami, a person addressed or spoken of, is French or not. It may come from ennui, magamwe for ye or you. They use it as a rule in addressing a person after the phrase they always open with conversation, which is azuna, which means listen or I am speaking. They also showed me many things, how to light a fire from the pith of a certain tree, which was useful to me in afterlife. But they rather overdid this branch of instruction one way and another. For example, Wiki had, as above indicated, a mania for bushropes and a marvelous eye and knowledge of them. He would pick them out from among the thousands surrounding us now, one of such particular suppleness that you could wind it round anything, like a strip of cloth, and as strong withal as a hawser. Or again another, which is a certain stiffness, combined with a slight elastic spring, excellent for hulling, with the ease and accuracy of a lady who picks out a particular twisted strand of embroidery silk from a multicolored tangled ball. He would go into the bush after them while other people were resting, and particularly after a sort which, when split, is bright yellow and very supple and excellent to tie round loads. On one occasion, between Igaja and Isun, he came back from one of these quests and wanted me to come and see something. Very quietly I went, and we crept down into a rocky ravine, on the other side of which lay one of the outermost Igaja plantations. When we got to the edge of the cleared ground, we lay down, wormed our way, with elaborate caution, among a patch of cocoa. Wiki first, I followed in his path. After about 50 yards of this, Wiki sank flat, and I saw before me, some 50 yards off, busily employed in pulling down plantains and other depredations, 5 gorillas, 1 old male, 1 young male, and 3 females. One of these had clinging to her a young fellow with beautiful wavy black hair with just a kink in it. The big male was crouching on his haunches, with his long arms hanging down on either side, with the backs of his hands on the ground, the palms upwards. The elder lady was tearing to pieces and eating a pineapple, while the others were at the plantains destroying more than they ate. They kept up a sort of whinnying, chattering noise, quite different from the sound I had heard gorillas give when enraged, or from the one you can hear them giving when they are what the natives call dancing at night. I noticed that their reach of arm was immense, and that when they went from one tree to another, they squattered along the open ground in a most inelegant style, dragging their long arms with the knuckles downwards. I should think the big male and female were over 6 feet each. The others would be from 4 to 5. I put up my hand and laid it on Wiki's gun to prevent him from firing, and he, thinking I was going to fire, gripped my wrist. I watched the gorillas with great interest for a few seconds until I heard Wiki make a particular small sound, and looking at him, saw his face was working in an awful way as he clutched his throat with his hand violently. Heavens, think I, this gentleman's going to have a fit. It's lost we are entirely this time. He rolled his head to and fro, and then buried his face into a heap of dried rubbish at the foot of a plantain stem, clasped his hands over it, and gave an explosive sneeze. The gorillas let go all, raised themselves up for a second, gave a quaint sound between a bark and a howl, and then the ladies and the young gentlemen started home. The old male rose to his full height. It struck me at the time that this was a matter of 10 feet at least, but for scientific purposes allowance must be made for a lady's emotions, and looked straight towards us, or rather towards where that sound came from. Wiki went off into a paroxysm of falsetto sneezes, the like of which I have never heard, nor evidently the gorilla, who went off after his family with a serenity that was amazing the moment he touched the forest, and disappeared as they had, swinging himself along through it from bough to bough in a way that convinced me that given the necessity of getting about in tropical forests, man has made a mistake in getting his arms shortened. I have seen many wild animals in their native wilds, and never have I seen anything to equal gorillas going through bush. It is a graceful, powerful, superbly perfect hand trapeze performance. Footnote to this chapter: I have no hesitation in saying that the gorilla is the most horrible wild animal I have seen. I have seen at close quarters specimens of the most important big game in Central Africa, and with the exception of snakes, I have run away from all of them. But although elephants, leopards, and pythons give you a feeling of alarm, they do not give you that feeling of horrible disgust that an old gorilla gives on account of the hideousness of appearance.